What's up, guys? Joel Valley from Media Glitch here, and man, we have a special episode for you today. I have the director, the writer, the everythinger of Owlboy, Simon Stuffsness Anderson.
You nailed it.
Dude,
there you go.
What do you want? What do you want? So, thank you so much for being on the show, all the way from Norway.
Yeah.
That was a long flight, right?
Yeah. How many hours is that? Like.
You can respond.
Yeah, you can.
As well.
14 hours, like.
It usually takes you about 23.
23. Oh, yeah. It's a long flight. That's the point.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Owlboy. A fantastic game. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
On the success, and physical copies coming soon. We will talk about that during this thing. I have so many questions, and I don't even know where to start because the game is so good, guys. The game is so good. You guys have to check it out. I'm not saying that because he's on the couch.
No,
I'm saying that because it really is an amazing game. And so now, as myself, I'm a filmmaker. I'm a video game lover. I'm always like, okay, one of my dreams is to make an independent film, or an independent game. I talked with you. We had lunch. We were talking about what the process is, and it almost changed my mind. But tell us about the process of from you concept the game. What is that? What was that whole process like? Walk us through that. Take your time. This is family that's watching. Media Glitch family. Take your time. Let us know. What's that process like?
All right. So where do we start? Just the very beginning, I guess.
Yeah, man.
Okay, so this is a long story though, but because the game's been.
I got time.
All right, so the game's been in development for like 9 to 10 years now, so it's a long history for that. But I guess to frame it sort of when we started developing, because I was doing pixel art by myself just as a hobby thing back in the day, and then as I developed my skills for that, I was, doing art school. I eventually ended up in a 1-year job for advertising and that sort of thing, but not really my kind of thing. And I always wanted to break into video games because, that's what I loved. So back then, what you have to remember is that there was no indie industry, and certainly not in Norway. What year was that? I forget. 10 years ago, that would be 2008? 2007?
Yeah, 2007.
2007, I guess?
Yeah,
2007. All of our math is horrible.
Yeah. And so Norway, the way it worked back then was that if you said that you were going to work in video games, they said, okay, but what are you really going to do?
Right.
What are you going to be doing with your life? And you had... some people have heard of the somewhat bigger game companies that you had from back in the day. You had Funcom, they made Anarchy Online, and now they're doing the Conan game and all of that. But their indie development was practically non-existent, and it hadn't really taken off at that point. So I was doing this sort of as a hobby basis, and then I met a group of other developers that were just doing their own kind of thing. Their artist had just left, and they were working on a little RPG project called Project Rhapsody. And if you know anything about game development, the last thing you want to do as your first project is a full-on RPG.
Right.
Because that's any RPG that's worth their salt is at least 15, 20, 30 hours.
Right.
Or something.
That's minimum.
Yeah.
But most people are used to a 50-plus hour journey in this day and age.
Yeah, and you need content for that. You need tile sets. You need practically everything. So what I started out doing was I was picking up work from the other guy that left, and I was trying to keep that thing alive for maybe a year or two. And then, I saw that this wasn't going anywhere, I started developing my own idea. This idea ended up being Owlboy. So back then, there was this hot new thing called XNA, which is now a defunct programming language. And you use this because if you program something in this language, then you could publish on the Xbox 360. Right. Now you had an opening to go into the indie scene on consoles. That was huge. So I was trying to figure out some kind of game that we could make using XNA. So now we have that. And another thing is that XNA, at least back then, we didn't know how to do tile sets in it. So we had to maximize the amount of space that you could make using as few tiles as possible. So how do you do that? Well, I had this thought idea. I was playing Kid Icarus and Super Mario 3. And both of those have sort of flying mechanics.
Right.
Kid Icarus has this thing where you have wings and you travel this vertical world kind of a thing with dungeons and all of that. But if you fall down, you die, which is weird because you have wings.
Right.
And then you have Super Mario 3 where you can kind of run and then do this glide thing.
Like
and
a
then
float.
Yeah, and if you press the button, you kind of glide down.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I thought, what if you press a button and you fly?
Yeah.
And you have all those things that Kid Icarus has, where you have the dungeons, but you can go all the way around because now you can fly. And the idea was, what if you fly high enough, you find things like floating islands. And those floating islands have their own populations that can speak their own language. It would feel like you were mute in those areas. And so that sort of thing evolved into us having a mute character. It was, we wanted a character with this being a disability rather than just, hey, we have solid protagonists, how about we do a twist on that?
Yeah.
It was sort of a natural evolution from that.
Oh, right on.
So now we had this concept where you have floating islands, which means you can use big tiles to make, a bunch of things that you can land on, which worked great for the XNA platform. And then you have some kind of character that can fly. And so we went through, I think I started with an insect, an alien with a jetpack, a dog with wings. And we were going to settle for that, but then they announced Okami, so we didn't do that. And then I think I was...
Because it started so long ago, you say Okami. It's like an old game
it was
now.
only back then, right?
And now we're thinking, wow, I mean, does that seem crazy that they've made 18 Assassin's Creed games
No.
since you guys started development?
No, that makes perfect sense. So we were going to sell it for that, and we had, I think I was somewhere between a seagull and a girl with pigtails that worked like propellers.
Oh, okay.
And then I suggested it to my then girlfriend, now wife, Julie, and she pitched that it could be an owl. I was like, there it is. This we can base everything on this. I think I sketched out all the main characters that one night, and then I spent the rest of 10 years interpreting why there's owls, why do things work the way they do, why do they have the cloak, all of that. Mm-hmm. So that was the bare minimum start of it all.
Yeah.
And then just as we were on the cusp of this, the main programmer left the project to work on other things, and I had there was me, Adrian Bauer, our level designer, and Jonathan Gear, our composer, left over from the other project, but none of us could program. So we had to find a new guy.
That's the other stuff.
So we walked around for literally a year with nothing to do, because there's no way we could progress any further from that. And then we found Joe Remy Matson, who started doing programming, and that's where the whole thing sort of took off.
And you guys just been grinding away ever since.
Yeah. Yeah, literally. That's the weird thing about this whole thing, is that most people assume that we treated this like a standard job that everyone has. You take a couple of months vacation and then you come back to it feeling refreshed. No, we've literally been sitting there for 9 years straight working on this.
Wow.
No breaks.
But you now that you're on every platform.
Yes.
That's got to feel pretty amazing after this huge, long
It's a relief.
drive.
I'll give you that. It's nice because I started out sort of as a Nintendo guy, and Joe started out as a Sega guy, and we started out as PC, but we always wanted to have it on console. And so now that we've released it on Switch, and then subsequently Xbox One and PlayStation 4, that's really nice.
Right.
Because now it's not just the really hardcore crowd. Now it's kids and parents and everyone else. So
Awesome. Okay, maybe this is me reading into it, but in the story, there's kind of like a bullying factor going on. Like they're really mean to this guy, you know. And I don't want to spoil ending stuff, but why? What was your reasoning behind that as the writer?
Well, I should stipulate, while I sort of lay down the groundwork for all this story, really a lot of the credit goes to Joe and Henrik Anderson, my brother.
Okay.
Both my programmers, because they took care of a lot of like the direct writing for things.
Right.
That's a lot of their credit goes to that. But I mean, I've been part of the process, but I just want them to have their due because I don't feel like they get that enough. But in terms of where that came from, it was sort of three things. So the first thing is when we started out the game, it was actually a comedy.
No, what?
It was supposed to be like an Earthbound kind of game where
don't get that at all.
No, exactly. Like it was supposed to be like jokes and everything with, but none of the like original intent of the game is still there. So we started out the game with like basic mechanics of like what can you do as an owl? Well, you can pick up stuff. Well, how about you can pick up your friends as well? And that's like where the gunner mechanic came along, where if you carry someone, then they act as your weapon and all that.
That's awesome, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I was really proud of that when I
Yeah,
thought
I
of
love
that.
it. That's great.
But that put us in a position because early on we understood that, well, you're kind of ostracized, and there's a central core theme in the game where you never really get credit for anything you're doing.
Because you can't.
Yeah.
There's a specific scene halfway through the game where they're like kind of yelling at him after the pirates have attacked.
Yeah.
And poor guy, can't say nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, like.
But it's like you don't get credit for what you're doing, but your efforts are still worth it.
Right.
And so early on, we knew that you had a lot to like fight against, and you're just based on the design of your mentor Agio, we knew that he was going to kind of be difficult to deal with, and your character was struggling with a few things. But it turns out that amplifying that helped us narratively.
Yes.
But not in the way you would expect, because you have your best friend Getty in the game, and the thing about Getty is, when you look at his design, like you have to make a game as if all of your audience are psychopaths. Because, yeah, I realize this sounds really weird, but when you play a game, you think of things as tools. Like, what can I get out of this character? What can I accomplish if I befriend this thing?
Yeah.
And most likely you're not going to be caring that much about who this person is. And when you have a character like Getty, who's like your best friend, he's really nice and everything, then people are going to think, he's a doofus, he's a nerd, and I don't like him. That's what your first instinct is going to be.
Right.
And what we did was, like, how can we make people like Getty? And what we did was, well, you have to hate everyone else.
Get it. I get it now.
Because
Look, they're laughing at us in the studio.
So it's like, favorite.
Yeah, no, Getty's great.
Because that's the thing, though.
Because he's the only one that kind of reaches out to you.
Yeah, and it worked narratively
Yeah.
because you wanted him to be the one to connect with you, and you wanted to understand that your main character is struggling with something, because then you feel that, and then you encapsulate that as you play. But in the very start, how do you establish that bond with Getty? And the way we did that was, okay, everyone else you must feel like is antagonistic and difficult. And so what we did was we start out with a really difficult segment where we encapsulate all of Otis's fears and problems and the struggles that he has in daily life. And Agio has to feel like the biggest jerk in the universe.
Oh, he does. You guys did well on that. I was like, man, I just wanted to slap him. I was in the stream. I'm like, man, this guy.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
It's cost us. Do you understand? Why are you such a punk, man? I should slap this dude.
Because by contrast, now Getty's really nice.
Yeah.
And like it's not that Getty isn't a nice character, but you have to frame that for
Exactly.
your audience in a way. And then once you have that established, now you can go in and tell the story that you want.
Right.
Because now they're in that mindset. And in that sense, the story that we were... the surprising thing is that we didn't know what the story was until halfway through development. There's this sort of thing where you have to find the red thread in a game. And we didn't set out to write a specific story. It was more what fits the structure that we built. And for Owlboy, finally we figured out that it's Otis' struggle. It's about him not feeling like his place matters. It's how everyone in this game feels like their place doesn't matter, but they're still gonna try and do something.
Right.
Because it matters to them. And that encapsulated every single character that we found. Even characters that were written as the goofiest, weirdest, dumbest creatures that you could think of, they still have that narrative arc that fits into your own. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of where we ended up with that. And the bullying aspect, I mean, of course we have, our own personal traumas, but we won't go too much into that.
Thank you. It hurts. Still hurts. Just give a brief kind of overall what exactly the parts that you played, because you did write some of the writing, directing, but as well as you drew everything.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit. What are the parts that you play?
Well, I'm sort of the. It's weird to say that I'm the creator of Owlboy because it feels like it's diminishing all the work that the rest of it. Yeah, because it was really a team effort
and birthed out of situation and circumstance too, right? So,
but I guess I was the one that originally pitched it, and I've sort of been like the gatekeeper for where the structure lies. I did some of the writing, but of course a lot of that credit is to Joe and Henrik. But in terms of everything else, I did all the art, and if there's anything associated with D-Pad's art, then I'm the guy that does it. I did the animations, the backgrounds, the characters. I did the designs. I did the website design, the posters, all of that.
Which is all awesome.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm not trying to kiss up or anything like that, because I have nothing to gain by doing that. But I just really love that style of art. What was your inspiration? Because it reminds me a lot of like SNK, Metal Slug, and maybe I'm totally wrong. But what inspirations do you draw from when you come up with the characters like that?
Actually, I love that every time I go and talk to people, they have different interpretations of what that is. Because the sort of a key principle of whenever I work on something is the goal is for it to feel like itself.
Yeah.
And when you can't pinpoint a specific inspirational source, that means that you've kind of nailed it.
Right.
But in terms of like specific inspiration, it's a little mishmash of everything, because back then the idea was that we were supposed to revive pixel art's medium, because the retro wave hadn't started back then.
I mean, you're coming out at a beautiful time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, there was a fear that we would come out not being relevant anymore because everyone was doing it, but it's been so common to like do quick projects because there's a lot of small studios now that at the very least you can tell that it's very handcrafted. But in terms of inspiration, like I can name drop so many games that I enjoy that has had an impact, but not necessarily in the style. Like, okay, just as an example.
There we go.
Like Wind Waker. Wind Waker had really interesting silhouettes, really good shapes for characters. So it's like that's an excellent way to study how to use shape to tell character studies.
Right.
So there you have that. Chrono Trigger, really great way to show how to develop a game where you want to find more things, but you can still just scoot right to the end. Characterization, that did a lot of stuff. Breath of Fire 4, excellent, absolutely excellent pixel art. One of the best that there is for that era. Street Fighter 3, specifically the first version's pixel backgrounds.
Right.
Amazing, just the way they do lighting on that. And of course, I mean, Zelda and Mega Man are my favorite series. I played everything.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that has eluded me so far is the CGI games because I can't get them to run. But like, okay, Nintendo, if you're listening, or Capcom, just give me the license, please. I'll make something. But like those two series have inspired a lot of the thinking process behind it. Because Zelda, the way they characterize things is extremely well, in the way that you open up new areas whenever you find something. Really good design tactic, and just the boss fights in Mega Man. Holy crap!
Yeah.
And the one that no one seems to have played here, the Battle Network series.
Oh, the Mega Man Battle Network. Yeah.
Yeah. While it's a bit of an unusual take on things, just imagine how well encapsulated all of the themes are within those designs.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at that, you know exactly what that character is, and you
Exactly.
know it's so pristine the way they did that. That big inspiration, I would say.
And now that being said, what was your favorite character to design, animate out of that whole bunch?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Because like,
They're all your babies. So you're like trying to pick a favorite.
yeah, it's like which one of your cats is the one you like the most? You
Right.
know? It's so. Like, of course, I loved animating all of Otus's expressions. That one's a given. Some of, let's just say, one of the more important characters later, I got to really stretch my skills on how to animate him at the end. But who is my favorite, though?
Well, while you think, speaking of Otis's animations, there's a part towards the end where Otis is like crawling on the ground.
Oh,
What?
no. That was painful to make.
Okay.
That was no.
Well, 'cause then what I'm gonna say is gonna be awesome,
Okay.
because it was just when I was watching it and then the reflection on the floor, and I was just like, at that moment I was just like, come on, Otis, come on, baby, like, and I'm just like, and I'm feeling this emotion for him, and he's just like, you know, he's like struggling on the ground, and it's so well done.
Oh no. Because that but the thing about that specific scene was that it was one of the last things I made. And like, it was going to be like, okay, this is going to be the most painful thing I've ever done. I need to make practically the child that I raised since birth up until he's 9 years old. I am going to have to make him suffer as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And like, I had to animate in little stutters as he tries to like lift his limbs up and his legs don't work. It was awful. It was,
I had no idea bringing this up was gonna be like this.
because it's like, well, just imagine that, like, after a decade of going through a character's struggles and everything, and you know that you're at that crucial point where you really have to hurt them.
Yeah.
And you have to make it look as agonizing as possible. That was,
But man, see, that right there, guys, what you just see, like, that shows how much care and love is in this project. You know what I mean?
there's a
Like, I don't think I've ever created anything about like that where I'm just like, oh, guys, let me tell you about this. Like,
that one.
I've never created anything like that. I'm so personal about, like, except for maybe my own kids, you know?
Yeah. Well, okay. Imagine if you had to make your kid cry on purpose.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That and a certain character that we won't speak about when he cries. Because that was also one of the last things I had to animate, and that wasn't fun.
But let me just, like, man, it was worth the pain it cost you, because when I was playing it, and it just makes me feel for that person. And we're talking about a video game again, you know?
That's the best when you can
Right.
relate so much to a character. There's very few games where I can say that I was over there like crying, and I was like,
So
you
good.
just hear the music, or
That-
you
So good.
barely see it.
That's,
This
it's
is
a
one of my-
testament. It's a testament.
This is one of my I won't call it a joy. It's one thing that I do a lot. Whenever I see that someone's playing the game on like a Twitch stream or a live stream or something like that, I always go in there for two specific scenes, like the halfway point and the ending, because I want to see what happens. Because it's like everyone has a different experience with these games, and I'm not expecting everyone to like it. Like we make the game for the people that like that kind of game.
Yeah.
But when it has an emotional impact, that was the entire reason why we made the game in the first place. So it's like whenever I see a Twitch stream and it gets to that point, I'm like, this is the reward. This is why we made the game for us. Whenever I see someone that's like crying over it, it's like, I did it.
Yeah, I mean, because the halfway point, there's a pretty big reveal,
there's a
and
thing.
it's great. You know, there's a thing. Yeah, we'll call it a thing that goes. You go, oh hell, you know, like, you know, with the whole development, everything, getting the game out in different platforms. What would you say was your biggest challenge during that time?
The answer might not be what you expect. It was ourselves.
Okay.
Because like I can list a few things which would be what you would expect. Like we started out in the Norwegian gaming industry. We got a nomination very early. That we submitted the game to IGF at, what was it, 2010, I think. We got a nomination for that, but we didn't win it. And then when we came back to Norway, we won Game of the Year, weirdly enough, even though it didn't come out until like 8 years later.
Hey, that's how they roll in Norway, man. You know, they see the future.
Yeah.
They see the future over there, guys.
But that ended up, we were some of the first applicants for the Norwegian Film Fund grant, which meant that, on one hand, we kind of sprung out the Norwegian gaming industry because of that. But because we got the grant, that meant we had a game that we needed to complete. We had to finish it. So we knew that we were already stuck in a development that had to be finished. So that was a given. The grant that we got seems like a lot of money, but for Norwegian money, it's not really, and it costs a lot to establish a company. So the financials, of course, those are difficult. Just continuing work is difficult. Promoting the game, traveling, because we went to everything, and that costs money. Doing our own finances was hard. So these are the things that you would think were the hard parts, like just running a company and all that. It wasn't. It was dealing with the fact that you're in an endless cycle, and you're the only one that's going to push you forward. Because like I said earlier...
Self-motivation, right?
Yeah. Because like I said earlier, the idea in Norway back then was that video games is not a real job. And when you're starting to come up on 5 years, 6 years, then the real struggles start to happen. Like, is this actually going to happen? Well, we can't stop now, because if we start a different project to get a different job, it's still going to take the approximate same amount of time before you get profitable. There's no point in quitting. Just on more of a personal note, considering I've been struggling with depression since I was 10, imagine that on year 8.
Yeah.
Just the demons become too much. And it's a difficult thing when something you work on becomes the antagonist, because it's supposed to be like the thing that brings you happiness, and when it doesn't, then what does bring you happiness?
Right.
So just ourselves, just keeping that ball rolling. And this is going to sound really cheesy, and I realize that, but it's honestly the truth. It was honestly the fans that kept us rolling through that. Mm-hmm. Because when you're making something, you're sort of stuck in your own office. You're looking at this thing, you see only problems, you see things that are not going to go the way you want it to, and you're sitting there with your own doubts, like, this isn't going to work. No one likes this. I don't like this, so of course no one else is. And then you take it to a convention, and you see people play it. You see 20-year-olds play it. You see someone bring their 5-year-old or the 10-year-old playing it, and they're enjoying themselves. suddenly it feels worth it.
Right.
You're doing an interview with someone that says like, I've been following you for the past 8 years, and I can't wait for that to come out.
Isn't that great? Wow.
That's the thing that kept us going. Like literally, we would go to the US to a game conference or something, have people tell us like, we really want this game, this is amazing, and then go back and like, okay, we're still gonna do this.
Yeah. Give you that little boost to go a little bit more longer.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. I can kind of relate to that, and I know this interview isn't about me, but as an independent filmmaker, when I was making my second feature, Beautiful Prison, you know, writing it in 2000, and then a decade later we're on set and we're filming it, and then you're always, because you're dealing with the depression and stuff like that, but you're also like, how's this going to be received when it's finally done, which adds another layer of stress on it, and then it's just year goes by and year goes by and year goes by, and you're just like, I have to finish this, and sometimes that you feel like you're the only one that cares about it, right?
Yeah.
But then when it's done, or when I'm doing test screenings and people are like, wow, that's really good, and now that my movie was out there, and I get these emails of people going, hey man, I had to deal with this, and there's certain themes in my movie, and people write and they're like, thank you so much, that helped me. That makes it all worth the while,
But it's also like I also should mention this because I don't know why I didn't. The biggest one of the biggest things outside of that is just all of us in the team together. Because the strange thing is that we decided that we weren't going to run the game as a company. It was more like a family.
Yeah.
And like Henrik and Joe and Adrian and Jonathan all were pitching in and trying to get this to work, and we were all communicating with this. And I mean, Julie, my wife, she was practically like,
he's right here.
she was holding me up through that whole thing. Like if she wasn't there at emotional support at like 3 a.m. every day, this could have gone very differently.
Yeah.
So just the fact that everyone was sort of on the same page, that really helped. And especially when you get that same question every time, it's like, why did it take 10 years? Should I answer that?
Yeah, do it.
Like,
why did it take 10 years?
Well, I guess we spoke a little bit about that at lunch. But it's a twofold answer, because we get that thing a lot, because it's practically what everyone writes. It's like a 10-year game. Like, why did it take that long? And the two answers for that is, first, I mean, we were amateurs when we started, and we decided to make the entire game sort of at the same time. So that made it almost impossible to cut content.
Right.
There were certain things that we ended up cutting that I really wanted to keep, but it made more sense structurally. And I won't say what that was because spoilers.
Oh, I know, but I want to talk about it kind of.
All right, let's just say, okay, screw it, Advent.
Yeah.
Let's just say Advent. We had the giant this giant town that we had in the middle of the game. And the idea was that in the early days of production, you were going to travel around these different areas. And Advent was supposed to be the big hub. You had a theater, and you had the military base in there. You had the school where you could learn about all the monsters. You had a shop where you could buy like bell shoes that ring. And all of this is made. It's finished.
Your fans are going to be like, what? We want to see it.
And
but there's a reason why it's not there, right?
Yeah,
Obviously.
And the thematic reason made more sense. And for that matter, the gameplay, it was just, why are you there? What is the point? And we needed to have something that made this whole journey give you motivated to keep going. So we had to literally sacrifice Advent for the good of the story. And we tried to do it in softer ways. There was at one point where we decided, okay, maybe it's just under siege and you can kind of crawl into the city and then still explore it. But that made no sense. Like,
right.
Why do you care then? There was another where it gets halfway destroyed and you this was made too. You would gather materials, put it into like a brick maker, and then build it back up.
No way.
And you had chains that you were supposed to attach to different islands and then put it back together.
That's crazy, man.
But it was like, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you do this? So we cut that. We cut a bunch of other stuff. The open areas were about 6 times as large. They had bosses in them that you've never seen before. So we realized that after a while that, okay, you have to, what is it called? Killing your children?
Killing your children, or, yeah.
So that's reason one why it took so long. It isn't because we were too stingy. It was that the integrity of the game would literally collapse if we removed too much. But the other, and that's the one that a lot of people get frustrated when I tell them, is this is the amount of time that it takes to make a game with this amount of people.
Yeah.
At this size. Because
so it's not a AAA studio. It's not.
Yeah, we're 5 people that was working on this project, and I'm the only artist. I have not taken any breaks. I was literally sitting there from start to finish making assets, over and over, day by day, day by day. Wow. We made tons of tracks, tons of levels. I think we have half of a game's worth of content that we had to remove just because it wasn't fun. But these things have to be made or you won't figure that out. And now, the thing that you get immediately after saying something like that is, well, that was just you guys. You just weren't effective enough. And of course, sure, we could have done things better, but we're not the only ones. Like right now, the game Heart for Alicia is being produced by a friend of mine, Alonso Martin. That was started at the same time as Owlboy was, roughly. They're still going. I think they're at year either 10 or 11 now. That's also Metroidvania, roughly about the same size. You have Joachim Sandberg, aka Cognac, that just released Iconoclasts. Started roughly about the same time, also kind of a Metroidvania, and roughly the same kind of thing. Also took 10 years. Mm-hmm. This isn't an unusual kind of thing, and that's the scary thing for people, because if you tell them that their big dream is going to take a long time and a lot of work, that's going to deter people. And that's why oftentimes when I get the question from new developers when they say like, what should I do to make my dreams come true? What should I work? I don't tell them like, well, you're going to have to be working for a long time and then maybe it'll work out. What I say is that you should work on what you feel passionate about and then funnel in everything that you enjoy into that project.
Right.
Because that's what we did. It's like every time this got too much, we just said, okay, what other things do we enjoy that we can use to boost this enthusiasm? Well, I really like Mega Man's combat. Let's make sure that the game is as fun as that. And then we were like, yeah, now I'm energized. Now I can work more on this. And it's that's the sad thing about when you do something as work, is that it's work. You're gonna be doing hard work. You're gonna be trying hard. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but it's still what you want to do.
Right.
You always forget that part of that of the job that is a job, and that it's gonna take that sacrifice until you get to that point where you get to like sit there on the stage and go like, I did this. Do you like this?
Right.
So it's that's really it. That's the reason.
So is there, going back to all the assets that were created, the town that was destroyed, when you get into that town, there's a part where, like I think it's by the graveyard, I'm not sure, someone comes out and they're talking about, I can't be in the city no more, it's too hard. Like there's dialogue. Is any of that like kind of like because of you guys having to kill a town that you love so much, or is there, you know what I mean? Is there?
Yes, but it gets even more personal than that. But the thing is, I'll be very light on the things that weren't affecting me personally, because I don't feel like that's my story to tell.
Okay.
But I can go into short bits on that. while we were making this game, my parents divorced,
Okay.
which was rough, but that happens. But right after that happened, my childhood home burned to the ground.
Oh man.
And I was moving somewhere new. This was the first time I'd lived by myself completely. So it was a really rough time, and that was around the same time that we were discussing this kind of thing. So we were at a really low point. And a little later, and I won't go too far into this because I don't think that's fair, but my programmer had a loss of his friends and a lot of other people.
Right.
And that affected him deeply. And that was specifically for those sections. And a lot of the harder parts of the game came directly from that. Because we're speaking double there. We're speaking of what happened in the game, and also we're speaking about what was happening in our lives at that point. Like, can we actually continue doing this?
Right.
What is the point of all of this when everything is just crumbling around us?
Right. Which, they say, write what you know. They say, your personal experience. Like, this is more than a video game. This is a journey. This is, you know what I mean? This is like, it's interesting because when I'm playing it, the result of that, when I'm playing it, I'm feeling for everything that's just going down, and it's interesting. It's interesting, because obviously if I remember that specific part of the game where, I remember he's like, and he trips and he's like, I'm done. I'm out of here, man. I just can't, Yeah. And, but it's a part of the game that stuck with me,
Yeah.
So I think, obviously this interview is, very personal. And this is what I want. This is what I want. I don't want to see another, no offense to IGN or anyone, but, you see all these, what did it take to make the game? Or, you know what I mean? How much was your budget? And this and that. And then like, okay, well, what do you got next? This is something more. This is like, I'm a real person. This is a real show. I even do a series called Road to Recovery because I was a drug addict for years, and I sold all my video games to pay for drugs. And the Road to Recovery series is me getting it back, So our audiences love to hear that personal journey, the struggle, the blood, the sweat, the tears, man. That you like. It's not like you just wake up one day and go, I'm gonna make a video game, and boom, it's there. No, there are life's challenges, man. Like, because life still has to go on, even though you're making a video game.
Yeah, this entire. It's the sort of thing where you can't be separate from the work that you make, even as hard as you try. That doesn't necessarily mean that you imbue everything that you make with your personal opinions or whatever it is,
Right.
But it at least colors what you have. That's also it's also the personal journey of a lot of different people, and when you sort of amalgamate that into one thing, then you get something that's very powerful after a while. There's I remember, I don't remember where I saw this, but I think someone just summed up the entirety of Owlboy just calling it a daddy issue game. And I remember that, but it's like, it's not that I take offense to that, but it's more, it's interesting that you can narrow something down that easily. But of course I have a different perspective because it's not just my personal stuff. This is Joe's life, this is Hendrik's life, this is
Right.
Jonathan's life, this is all of our lives. And there's story elements there. Like, a very important part of the game, won't speak too much about that either, is reconciliation with people that you have problems with.
Right.
And it's really easy to summarize those things as something very basic, but it comes from a much more complicated place than that. And for that matter, you have to remember that sometimes it's just that this is the best way for the story to go. It's not like we set out to make a story about that has war in it.
Yeah.
It's just, what is it about, what motivator can we use in the story to establish the themes that we want? And it turns out that that's a very powerful way to get those messages across.
Wow. Awesome. So, we're having lunch,
Right.
and earlier, and we're talking. We talked about a million things. And I was like, we probably should just go in the studio, because I was like, wanting all those answers too. But we did talk. It was interesting because I said, what was the hardest boss to like animate? And I brought up a couple examples, and you can answer that question. But it led to you telling me about this really cool boss that never even made it into the game.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit about that?
Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So, what you were asking me was like, what is the hardest boss to animate? And what you brought up was a snake guardian that appears. And what I was listing as an example is, technically that should be the easiest one, because it's just a head, tons of body segments that are looped over, and then tail. And what most people do is that you give that whole thing like a spine system, and then you just go like move that there, and all the parts move around and that kind of thing. But you have to remember back earlier, I said we made this in XNA in our own custom engine, and that means we didn't have any integrations for anything. So my brother, who's the tech whiz, coded our own like spinal system. So I can move stuff around, but it was done by hand most of the time, and the program would crash every like 2 seconds back then.
Oh my gosh!
So that took a lot of time. So that was kind of a pain.
Kinda. That sounds horrible.
Well, 10 years, But the thing was that we used that for another part of the game. I think it was in the last stage. We were going to have another boss, which was a massive screen-covering gecko. You're supposed to climb up a tower. You lost your flight ability for some reason, and you're jumping up these little platforms, and there's a gecko climbing with like 4 limbs up the side of this thing, and it's using this spinal system as it's doing it, hand animated. It's got 4 legs, I think it's like 2 or 3 body segments, and a head that you could crack open, and it has different parts of it. It could shoot a tongue out that had its own spinal system to it.
Sounds so beautiful.
Has like a back laser that would fire everywhere. But that got cut. But that's not the only one.
Really?
We have 3 other bosses in conjunction with that one that we cut. They were all equally complicated. Oh, man. There was, let's see.
Is there any way
that you can...
Am I asking too much for like a screenshot to put?
We should have the golden gawk at least.
Where would I find
It doesn't even. You can send it to me later.
Yeah.
I'm just. Is there any way?
Yeah. No,
have you ever showed people?
We've showed some people, yeah, but it's
not.
It's not very public,
So here's the thing: like, if you've sat through what's already 45 minutes of this interview, you deserve to see
exclusive.
Yeah, right. Let's see some of these bosses that they sound phenomenal.
So, they found something.
Oh, really?
But let's see. What were the other ones? The one that was closest to getting in the game was what we called the Golden Gawk. That was actually in the old 2011 demo, I believe. It was the Gawks, the green guys with the tentacles on the face. There was a massive version of that. It was gold. It was about 3 times the size. That would just fly around, and we made its own dungeon that we unfortunately had to cut right before release. That you would fly into the hive of the Gawks, and you had millions of them flying out, and then one more would just burst out of the ground and it would fly around and like chase you. It had this dash move thing. But that one was fairly easy to make. Then you have.
This sounds so good. I wish.
Let's see. Then
I get it.
Then we have what we call the Algros, which is, imagine 2 rocks sort of in a clamshell kind of thing, but held together by an eye through like green slime, and it would fly around and kind of clamp. Whenever it would open its eye, you can kind of shoot in there, and it would fire like slime lasers at you. And this was a optional boss. You remember when I said that the game used to have it was about 6 times as large as the open area? You would just fly around at random, and then you would just encounter it. It would just come out of nowhere and just try to eat you. And the last one is...
So why did he get cut if it's just a random thing?
Because... two reasons. The fourth character that we didn't add. I can sort of reveal that. There's a character that you meet in Advent called Cornell that is like a scientist, and she helps build some things. She was actually going to be a fourth gunner. She would have a bazooka made out of bamboo, and she would fire explosive propeller things that you could also grapple to. But it turns out that just wasn't fun. We tried her in a ton of different ways, and it just broke the entire game when we did that.
Oh, wow.
But the last one is, I forget what we called it. We had a bunch of names for it: the monster, the abomination, the experiment. It was for an entire section that we cut from the last dungeon that we redid, I think 3 times. It was sort of a trash area where a bunch of old stuff was stored up, and this thing would appear randomly in the stage in the background, and then finally would emerge. It was this horrifying orb thing with millions of eyes that was patched together with like skin bits.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
It would grow random arms with different abilities that each gunner had to use a special ability for. So one you had to grapple off, one you had to bomb off, one you had to burn. And it would twitch around while it would like grow this disgusting arm at you. Sometimes it would cave you in, sometimes it would chase you down the hallway.
And all these assets were built?
They're built, they're finished, they're made. It's just...
Does that ever, like, maybe go into a game in the future? I don't think there's an Owlboy 2 in the works, but what I'm thinking.
Well, the thing is, if we were to add those in, we're looking at maybe a year or 2 extra work just to make them work. Because the reason why we cut them, it wasn't because they weren't done and they didn't work. It was because they weren't fun.
Yeah.
It was sort of a waste of time, and it didn't make any sense thematically. And there's a ton of stuff. Okay, I can mention at least one more thing that
exclusives, kids,
that people will scream at me for deleting. You used to be able to drive mechs.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you can actually see them as an asset in the game somewhere, but every character could jump in, and you would essentially have this owl robot with giant swords that you could run around. You could fire electricity attacks. You could chop things with these massive swords. You would fight like hordes of pirates and things, and that sounds like the best thing ever. But then you realize that your main character can fly, and this thing can't.
Yeah.
So why would you ride it? Like, what's the point? And you're thinking like, well, just put them in a corridor where there's no point in flying. So we did that. It was boring.
Yeah.
Like, you're just chopping all these enemies, and like, why are you doing this? Like, okay, you have 3 seconds of cool, but then you're just repeating the same thing. And like, we would have to spend like another year building specific assets just to make this weird thing work. And so we had to cut it.
Well, it's respectable that you cut it because for the better of the game because there are a lot of games out there today that have pacing issues, that have repetitiveness, that have things that like, man, why did they put that in there? It doesn't make no sense. Instead of you being one of those games, you took the higher route. That's respectable.
The game could easily be 30 to 50 hours just with that kind of content that we have in there, but literally the only thing that I regret that we had to cut, and that was the part with the golden gawk, was that you had a part that explained more of Alphonse's character.
Okay.
And I really wish we could put that in there because it explains a lot of what happens to him, but it wouldn't work with what we had.
Story still works though, without it.
I hope so.
I think it does. Like, I understand his character and the decisions that he made. So, are there any? You said there's the mech there is somewhere in the game.
Yes.
So, are there any Easter eggs that you guys put in there that people have found or haven't found?
I guess you have to specify what kind of Easter egg we're talking
I don't know,
about.
just maybe like, oh, there's a fan thing. Like, oh, is your wife in there?
Actually, yes, she is. She's a playable character.
Oh, really?
That was a
Yeah.
redhead back then.
She was a redhead. So
Oh.
no, she wasn't supposed to be like a big thing. It was just supposed to be like a side character. But then it turns out that we needed something for a part there, so she's in there.
Oh. Yes, okay, no, I see, I know what it is now.
But
No.
like
So just for a brief part of the game, you come in and, okay, that's cool.
let me think. Like Easter eggs. Like if you're talking about specific Easter eggs, there's a couple. Like there's an NES cartridge in one of the stores, and
That's the stuff I'm talking about.
an actual
there.
NES in the laboratory.
I didn't even catch it. Now I gotta go back and play it again.
In fact, the idea was that you would bring the cartridge to the lab and you'd play a game on the big TV, but didn't get around to that. The store, ironically, is filled with like different things from older projects that we never finished.
Yeah.
So there's like a shovel from a project called Treasure of Mahal that we never finished. There's a shirt from a game that Joe made called Dungeon Chaos. There's like a blue shirt with like a drape hanging in front of it. That's from I think it was the second game that I ever completed called World, which is I just kind of wanted to make like a free form Zelda game in a program called Click and Play, so you would explore that. In Otus's home, there's a Triforce on one of the books. And there's, ironically, a little owl carving in one of his shelves, which I have on my own desk.
Oh, nice.
So I have that there. But in terms of like references back to the community, that's a difficult one.
Well, I think you gave some, like the
Yeah, I
Triforce.
guess.
That's definitely stuff like that, you know. And there's probably some in there. If you found any, put in the comment section below.
But there are things that no one has ever found, though.
Yeah. So if you found it, well, maybe they have. They just haven't voiced it yet. So voice it in the comment section, and you'll tell them, you found it. That would mean you'd have to read every comment that comes through.
Either that, or it's like, no, that was a mistake. that happens.
Is not an Easter egg.
No.
So, one thing that, out of many things that stood out about this game was the score. And you know you're playing something and listening to something special when there's this level where you're trying to get to this contraption and there's all these like wasps and bees, insects that are flying around. And it literally turns into like a horror with string, like it's full orchestrated score. It's pretty amazing. And it's so different from one level to the next level, and like when you're riding out on the dragon thing, but everything works. Talk about the music. Who's the brains behind that? It's amazing.
All right, so our composer through the entirety of this was Jonathan Gear, and he's done a ton of different things. I think he has his own jazz band, doesn't he? Or is it jazz?
He's got a couple of bands.
Yeah, a
Couple bands.
So he's
Not just one. Kids. He's got to have a couple bands.
But the point is, he's extremely talented at what he does. But often what he would tell me was that I would send him a piece of art for a level, and then he would just make something amazing based on that. So he would try to
crazy.
interpret the art. And there's a specific part in Owlboy, I sent him a snow landscape. And the thing about that area was that it was supposed to be like a 3-second thing that you walk through. It was literally just going to be you walk through this thing and you get to a new area where you solve a new thing. And then he made this amazing, beautiful score for it. They were playing on loop in the office. It was like, we need to make this a big area. We don't have a choice now. And the ironically, I mean, the guy is a maniac. But right before launch, he had done everything like sort of digitally, but by himself. With his own instruments, and then he just went, okay, I'm going to redo the entire thing with my own live orchestra.
Wow.
So that kind of came out of nowhere. It sounded beautiful. But that, just to go back to that specific thing that you mentioned, the insects, that was an awful thing, because...
I'm always bringing up awful things. What's the deal?
That was... the specific part about that is that I have a crippling phobia of the sound of insects. I don't know why it's specifically that, but if I hear that, I kind of freeze up.
Like a cockroach, like across the floor?
Oh, not the cockroach, just the sound of a fly or a wasp or something. Okay. I'll lock up. And then we made an entire dungeon where you have like bee mosquitoes that have insect sounds that he found like actual sounds of insects. I'm sitting there twitching as I'm playing it. And then there's a moment where we have what we call the dark mites that come out only when it's dark. And he starts playing that score that you mentioned, like the full-on horror. And he's got recordings of insects playing around. It's like, you made my horror movie.
Oh yeah.
It was he absolutely nailed that fare that I have. So I hate playing that section.
So the soundtrack is on vinyl.
It's on vinyl. It's on SoundCloud and I believe Bandcamp. And if you buy the game on Steam, I think you get the soundtrack with it, if I remember correctly.
Wow. I've been tempted to buy a record player because a lot of my soundtracks that I love, Altered Beast, Revenge of Shinobi, some of those are coming out on vinyl now. So it's pretty cool that.
Yeah, I'm so happy we got that.
That's awesome. So where can they find his work? He has a website, right?
It's just JonathanGear.com.
JonathanGear.com. So if you want to find out more about that.
And I think the vinyl that we had at Animate is sold out at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah. Send him an email if you guys want some more.
I mean, they still have the bog went up if you want one of these things.
Okay, so this game is first it was available on Steam. Is that the first platform it came out for?
Yeah.
Okay, and then now it's all the consoles at this point.
It's all of it. It's PC, Mac, Linux, PS4, Switch, and Xbox One.
And now we have a new edition coming out. Can you talk about that and when the people can expect it and what's coming with it?
All right. So on May 29th, the physical edition is dropping. That's going to be Switch and PlayStation 4. And
for all you collectors out there, like myself.
But if you want the really, really collector's edition,
the super duper mega.
Then we have the special edition that's coming out July 13th. And there's a good bit of stuff in there. So you have, let me think. There is the notebook that you get with that. There's the manual. You get a certificate in there just to show that you own it. There's 2 different kinds of reproductions of the coins within the game. There's 2 pins that you can just put on your shirt. There's the stickers. And did I miss anything? No, I believe that's it. Nope. And you get the soundtrack.
Oh, nice. So that's coming soon. Man, we look forward to seeing that. We'll have more information as it gets closer. Check our Twitter, my Twitter. Also, we'll be doing an unboxing of that collector's edition for you guys so you can see what comes in. You're not going to want to sleep on this, though, because it's definitely one that's probably will sell out. So don't sleep on it. Get on it right away. So that being said, we are going to dip into our Q&A portion. We're going to go live with you guys to answer some questions. So we'll do that right now. Okay, so if you're watching this live on YouTube, we are here with Simon, the developer, director of Owlboy. So we're gonna take your guys' questions. We got other questions coming in. Your guys' fan base is gonna be joining us. So we've already shot a bunch of stuff, but we're gonna do the thing. So are we live? Are we already recording on this? Okay, here we go.
Wow.
Okay, so now we're at the part where we're live with you guys so we're streaming this right now. We're gonna take some questions live right now. I got a couple cameras going on, so if you have a question about Owlboy, big or small, I got the guy that probably has the answers. And so if you guys have any questions, even him personally, go ahead and ask. Megan, what's the first question coming in?
Right. What is the crummiest game that you played as a child that, like, it wasn't, like, groundbreaking now, but, like, back then it was the one game that you just loved playing?
So could we rephrase it as
Like,
a game that is universally hated but we love?
yeah, something like...
Or that he loves?
Something that wasn't like, oh, yeah, I loved playing this game because everybody told me it was great, but it was like, what would be... Like, for me, it's like the Looney Tune Adventures game on the SNES.
But that was great, though.
Yeah, like, to me, that was like a really great game, but, like, at the time, it's like, oh, it was the game that, you know, your mom rented or your mom bought you because she didn't know.
You have to remember that back then, too, there weren't that many people that would recommend you stuff.
Yeah.
You didn't have the whole online thing, so you just found stuff and you played it. Just off the top of my head, as a rough example, a game that had a big impact on me, but no one seems to have played, is Police Quest. It's an old Sierra title, and it was sandwiched in between all those that everyone likes. It's between King's Quest and Leisure Suit Larry, and I forget all of the games that I made, Space Quest. But Police Quest specifically, the interesting bit about that, like, now the pixels are pretty ugly, but it had two things going for it. It was very interesting. The first is that the pixels were so big that you can kind of interpret what was there.
Right.
As it was sort of like a interpretive art in a way. So you got more out of less, in a sense. The other thing was that it had that text interface. So you literally felt like you had any option to do whatever you wanted. Like, if you want to type in "get naked," you can get naked and get, it ends the game. If you want to, like, say something dumb to someone next to you, the game might not understand it, but it felt like you could do it.
Right.
And for that matter, like, it was one of the first, like, actually open world games, because you could get a car and just drive around anywhere, which was kind of neat. And the last thing was, it taught me English.
Oh, yeah. Because you're from Norway.
Yeah.
For those who don't know.
So one of the...
You got a question ready?
We're going to go through hers and then we'll go through mine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Some of the first words that I learned to spell were open door, and, of all things, briefcase.
Oh, nice.
Briefkasse. It was awful to write out. But you needed it to get into that damn locker and get, like, the pen out of the freaking suitcase. Like, and how it differs from a suitcase, it's the same thing that,
If you could go back and visually recreate any game from your youth, which one would it be?
Where do I start? Okay,
Just one.
Just recreate.
Yeah, just to recreate visually.
Can I pick more than one? No.
Top three. We can do
Top three.
Top three.
E.T.
Come on. I think you can use that.
You're in the right place for that.
Listen, I kind of like E.T. It gets a lot of... People get a lot of hate on that. And I kinda
Because that would be an amazing challenge. Like, if I can make that into a good game, like, that would be fantastic. Chrono Trigger.
Whoa. You're stepping on Holy Land right
I know. But recreate. Okay, third one would be like a souped up version of Mega Man 3, I guess.
Oh, wow.
That'd be really fun.
Is that your favorite Mega Man? 3?
Out of the classics, that's 3. X series, it's X1 to 3. Battle Network is the third one. Legends is the first one. Zero, it's number 1. And what's all the series now? First Star Force. Come on, I know there's more than this. Yeah, that should be it.
Okay.
That's the list.
You do it's like 8-bit pixel art for this game, right?
Uh-oh.
Oh. Yeah, I do pixel art for it, yeah.
Right.
Pixel
Well,
art.
he had mentioned that there's a lot of 2D pixel art games out on the market. However, yours does seem to get more attention, or it attracted his attention over a lot of other 2D games. And so he was just asking, from a stylistic perspective, what you think might be different about the way you do 2D pixel art than what you seem to see out there.
Well, the thing is, it's more of a business problem for most people, because what's happened in recent years now is that development tools have gotten easier to use, but that means that you get a lot of people that aren't necessarily professionals that are starting out, and of course eventually they'll learn more skills and get better at their craft. But when you start out, often you begin with pretty rudimentary pixel art. And if you've never done that before, then of course you're going to go for something more basic. Part of the reason why I started working on Owlboy to begin with, and you have to remember this was before the whole retro wave and all of that, was to bring back pixel art and become an example for how you can do that properly. So I've been completely uncompromising about the detail level and just trying to make it as good of an example of that field as possible. But there's plenty of other games that I could plug that have done excellent pixel art. I think the perception is just that the volume of new people coming in makes it seem like pixel art is this sort of low-end field that people don't know what they're doing. But tons of talented people, it's just that they get hired by people, and then they get jobs making professional art, and it doesn't feel like they're doing indie development anymore.
Right.
Rachel has a question.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Rachel. She said, I pointed out early on that solace seems to be based on the Latin word meaning alone. Was this something done on purpose or a weird coincidence?
Yes.
Yes, it is hot.
The name, so that was part of what the naming reason for Solus was.
Okay.
And it fed into him thematically. And in fact, all of the names of the characters are meant to have a dual meaning in some capacity. So good on you for catching that.
Is Owlboy vegetarian?
I don't know.
I don't think owls are vegetarians.
I know, but you never see him like grab a mouse and just, you know, and like
That's the
and then get energy.
the thing.
But
was,
you see him pull up. You see him pull up like
the fruits and
the fruits and stuff.
the ishes, because we made
Yeah.
it's a weird pun because we started with red ishes and then blue ishes. But to put it this way, you started at the very beginning. You got energy from grabbing and potentially eating like fireflies. So I don't know. It's one of those things where I guess you can guess what you want from that. Maybe.
Maybe he's a vegetarian. In the last iteration of the game, he could be a vegetarian. Early on, he wasn't.
Early on, he wasn't.
Okay,
Yeah.
something like that. So
All right, so I have one that is about character development.
character development question.
So, how long does it take to create a character? Like, from concept, I know, like, years, but, like, for example, Otis, like, how, was that just, like, one night and you were like, this is it? Or did he just kind of evolve over the entire period?
The thing is that this is one of those things that's going to be different for everything. There's some characters that we come up with like on a split second, and some that have evolved over time. Now, Otis, he had sort of the main traits fairly early on. It was actually a kind of, this is what the character is. I knew what it was on day one, but the specifics of his character changed over the years. I mentioned that earlier, but it's about the halfway point of the game we found out what the red line is, and that really affected what his character was going to be. But then you have characters like, let's say Roland. He's a stick bug that you meet later in the game, and he was just kind of, I love him because I was just like, I need a sassy bastard that can be the sassy bastard to the other character that you have with you.
Right.
And it was like, this is Roland. He's going to be jumpy, he's going to be doing the hand thing at everything he speaks about. He's gonna go like to everything. He was really easy. And then you have characters that you start out being one thing and then change completely. I won't say too much, but the character of Toby is one of them, where he was meant to just be this random goofball that you meet, and then through what we searched for other characters, he took on traits from other plans that we had elsewhere, and suddenly he became something a lot more.
Right on.
So to me, there's a few steps to it, and I'll cut it short for that. But essentially it is either I have a theme or a look, and then I start interpreting that, and that's sort of the base for it. And then you put them into context, and if it needs changes, then over time that'll develop as you go.
Next question.
Another question I've got from Paul earlier, and we talked a little bit about it. The game Owlboy is all text-based dialogue. Was there a reason, in budget or otherwise, why you would or wouldn't do voice acting for Owlboy? Or do you prefer
There's a
it to be-
piece of voice stuff.
Yeah.
It's real brief though.
Yeah, it's like little grunts and things. We got Rice Pirate from Sleepy Cabin to do the voice of Molstrom, and there's like little laughs and things that we put in there that we dub. It's sort of a twofold thing. We started out doing text because that's what we could do back then, and we started development because we got funding from the Norwegian government, and then you're required by the time by the time it's finished to translate it over to Norwegian. So we knew that it was going to be dual language regardless of what region we released it in. But from just a personal standpoint, the problem with voice acting is that that's its own art form. If you sort of just tack that on at the end and you don't have the money to hire really talented people, then your game's going to suffer. It's sort of like hiring a half-assed musician to do the score for your game. It's not going to work as well. And so we had to recognize that if we're going to do voice acting, then we need to know what we're doing, and we need to do it competently. And considering that the game is in, I forget if it's 12 or 15 languages now, doing all those voices with voiceover, and that they're all done well, it was just an impossible task for the budget that we had.
That makes sense.
Sad Waters asks, I don't think this will be answered since it's not supposed to be answered, I think.
Uh-oh.
So answer it however you feel you need to.
Okay.
He says, but what happens to Otis at the end?
I knew this was coming. At some point we get that one. I think the only answer that I can give that is at this time is that I will leave that up to you. But I can say that there is a specific set of events that happen. I know about them, and there's hints to why that happens and how it happens. If you look close enough in the game, you'll know why things happen the way they do.
We just lost stream.
Oh no.
That phone got too hot.
It's like iPhone is too hot going into emergency mode.
Because it's still so hot in here?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh.
It is really hot.
It's trying to give me a code here.
Oh, what if we...
Whoa,
I wonder if it's still running.
that's good.
But can I say what I told you today, like I found stuff after the game?
Well, I mean, there's
That
more.
kind of help?
There's
And
more
then
there.
you're telling me there's even more and more.
Yeah, there's stuff in the game that no one's found yet. But there's more importantly, there's stuff. I can tell you right now, there's nothing hidden in the code because that would just be silly of us to do. But it's stuff that you have to do, and once you figure out what the significance of that is, then maybe things will make more sense.
Yeah.
All right, Radical Reggie asks.
Radical Reggie!
He says, did Owlboy have any reflections from your real life experiences?
Oh, wow.
Yes.
We talk about that too in the full interview.
Yeah. The short of it is, I have had pretty severe depression for my entire life, which has impacted me and the way that we make the game. There's been personal loss, houses burning down, people have passed away. That has had an effect on that. And just in general, just the entire development process has had an effect.
Again, we did do an hour-long interview, very personal, very real interview earlier, which we'll post later. So this is just the Q&A portion. Next.
You have mentioned in some time that you did a mock-up of Owlboy with the NES limitations, but you never showed the public. Can you finally show it, please?
Oh, please.
Oh, well, you
I can-
Can we put it on this episode?
I could probably give you a screenshot for that.
So-
It's a. I can reveal one thing. At one point, you were supposed to. There's an NES in the professor's lab. You're supposed to bring a cartridge in there and play the NES version on that big screen. But
so
of
good.
course, we never got around to that because we had an entire game to finish. But who knows? I mean, we have a playable version of it.
So if let's just say the game does well, one thing that they love to do nowadays is when we went from the PS3 to the PS4, we got Last of Us remastered. We got all these remastered games. Do we see an Owlboy remastered with these new things in it? Because Owlboy's done so well on the Switch, you're able to hire in more people, and you're able to add all these little things that we've talked about today.
So you're asking me this after like just finishing a 10-year development cycle.
Yeah, I know.
Like, can you go back and like make more stuff?
No, see, what you do is you hire another 5 people and you go, okay, here you go.
So do you guys want to suffer for a bit? I mean, but still, I mean, it's possible. It's definitely possible.
Yeah.
We have tons of content that people might enjoy. I won't say absolutely no, but in the immediate future, I need to let my team rest. That's the first
For
priority.
the next.
Blazeheart Panther Blaze asks, do you think you'd collaborate with Nintendo to bring an Otus amiibo toy to the public?
I absolutely would do that in a second if they were interested. Because there's a lot of different companies that have done something similar. The thing is, if you're thinking about the Shovel Knight thing, for example, the thing with that is that the way they produced it, they spoke to the people that made Disney Infinity and kind of went a backdoor kind of a way to make that work. It wasn't just that they went to Nintendo and went, can we have an amiibo? Making an amiibo is a very complicated and difficult process. So yes, I would do that in a heartbeat, but I don't think that's realistic at the moment. And the other thing is, I would definitely make something amiibo-like if people wanted it, but then a lot of people have to want it because these little figurines are very complicated and very difficult to produce. So if all of you want that, just start a petition and just follow through with actually making it. And
That sounds like a great opportunity for a Kickstarter.
I would make it in a second.
Sad Waters asks, Simon, do you have any intention of releasing earlier alpha and beta builds to the public? I'd really love to see some of these scrapped content.
Tell
or
her.
anything else that's-
This one you reply to, if you can.
Okay, well, it's already offline.
Oh, because if you watch this whole thing, you would see some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can put it like this: you don't want to play the older beta versions, because there's a reason why we finalized the games, because it wasn't particularly fun in the earlier builds. So,
2012. But
yeah, a lot of people keep finding the old demo from
it's there
like,
somewhere if you dig more.
and it's awful. So there's really no reason for you to play that version.
Wow.
In follow-up to the voice acting question, Smash JT says he agrees with your view on the voice acting as far as it being an art form. Power Metal Gamer also said, I find the game a lot more personal with text-based dialogue. Like when I played RPGs back in the day, they were a lot more meaningful for me, and I would be heavily invested.
Well, you create the voice for yourself,
Right.
and it becomes more
It's pretty
personal
much
that way.
exactly what you're
Exactly.
wanting it to be, and Paul agrees with that too. So maybe worth sticking to text, even if voice acting became a problem.
Plus, it's more fun when you get to, like, when you're sitting there and you do the voices for them.
Yeah,
Because then you're like, oh, this is my Otis voice.
Maybe
Well,
not
we-
everyone does that, maybe.
Yeah.
we have like a
I
fan.
do, okay?
We have like a fan voice dubbing crew that's trying to go through the entire game and like have assigned voices to people. So
Oh,
it's
that's
fun.
awesome.
Though
That's amazing.
And an interesting challenge next time would be try to make a game without any text in it, because that means we don't have to pay like millions in translation fees.
It's all body language.
When you wanted to make the game, was it to tell a story or just to be fun? For some, it can be 50-50, but one normally wins. So.
It changed completely during development. We started out with just a game about mechanics. We had practically no story. There was an overarching idea, and I sort of knew where the game was going to end, but all the things in between, it was just, what can you do with this thing? What can you do with that thing? And then gameplay. And then at about the halfway point, we made some big changes because we figured out what the story was. And we also figured out that a lot of the different optional content that we had were a lot more boring if they were optional. For example, all the gunners were optional to add to your team. Alphonse, for example, the idea was you would travel around this big dungeon and you would find him and he would be asking you for a crystal skull. No, not a crystal, I mean a gold skull that he used for acting. It was, the Hamlet kind of thing. And if you brought that back to him, he would join your team. But that meant that every single part of the game from there on would be optional if you had him in there. So it would be difficult to write him into dialogue. Story would be weird. You couldn't build as many themes as you wanted to. And the second we made him mandatory, all of a sudden the story became a lot more important. And we realized that we had a lot more that we wanted to tell. And so it became a lot more about the story in that aspect. Now, we still tried to make the gameplay fun, but considering how much of a shift that was, it might be a bit weird for people if you came in from the very start. So, big shift.
Fair enough. Lastly, is it weird the tunnel sections reminded me of Alien 3 on the Genesis? Is that on purpose?
I've never played that game.
I have played it. The tunnel sections.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of why that resembles that.
It's a great game.
Alien 3 was creepy.
It was
It was
fun.
a really legitimately scary game on the Genesis.
It's fun.
I mean, there's a lot of games that have done very creepy corridors. Like I think my favorite one is the what's it called? SAX essentially when you meet your clone in Metroid Fusion. That was creepy as hell. That thing chased you and you have to do exactly the right thing or it murders you.
Yeah, because it's all like souped up and powered and powerful, right?
You can use everything that you can, but better.
Yeah, have a better. So.
But I don't recall anything it being particularly based on. I made things and then we continue making things.
Yeah. Sweet. Is that
I
that?
think,
Is
I
that
think
that?
we got all the questions.
All right. Well, that's our Q&A portion. And so thank you guys so much for watching. And thank you so much for being on the show, for hanging out today. And, if you're ever in the area.
If I'm ever in the U.S. and specifically Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Excuse me, we accidentally ended up here for like a month once.
Oh yeah, that's true. During that snowstorm, If there's another snowstorm.
And if I'm ever in Norway, I'll come check you out.
Yeah.
And so thank you again so much. We appreciate your time. Thank you to your wife as well for coming in and just this in-depth look at Owlboy and the process of making it, and just we covered a lot of great stuff. And if you lasted the whole video, you got to get some of the stuff that people have been wanting to see for probably a long time. So it's cool and just an awesome game. If this is the first time you're hearing about it, go check it out. Buy it right now. You will not be disappointed. It's amazing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hey, like, comment, subscribe, all that goodness. If you're watching this on live TV, thank you again for letting us in your home. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.